Hello, hello, hello. Alrighty. Guess we are live here. There we go. Hello, everybody. This is John again for Some Roses Are Red on our first, very, very first live Facebook and YouTube live event, I guess you could say. So we're dealing with in the month of February. If you've been following the show, you saw in January we did all of our holiday shows, and I did want to thank again Erica and Delvis, Vibrancy was our third, uh, my mom and Richard, and also Daryl and Andrea for stopping through and showing us, or telling us rather, about some of their holiday traditions and things they celebrate the holidays with. Um, let's see. Oh, Valencia joined. Hello, Valencia. How are you? So today in February, I decided that we wanted to make this month about communication. And I figured that communication was such a broad and expansive topic that we could cover a number of things in communication, how people communicate one to another, and again, not necessarily relationships, but just how people talk to one another. So I figured, why not use a platform like the internet or like going live on, like I said, Facebook and YouTube to see what other people think, to see what their opinions are, and what they want to talk about. So, figured I'd start by asking a question here. First question being, since we are dealing with communication, and that first question, let me pull it up here. Our first question in regard to communication shall be da, 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 da. In your personal life, in your very personal life, your day to day, your 9 to 5, if you're working, or just your 24 hours within the day from 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. In your personal life, who do you go to for sound guidance or sound advice on most topics? And that could be we'll ask in your not in your age, but we'll say someone who's older than you. So who do you go to for sound guidance of your elder peer group? So we'll say anybody who's 10 years and above. Who do you talk to about minor issues or even major issues? Who do you discuss things with? Who do you talk to? For me, who do I talk to? I don't know if I talk to anybody specifically in my elder group. I think I would say if I did talk to anyone who's 10 years old, maybe my mom, maybe that would be the closest person that I talk to. I often tend to solve things by myself because it's a little bit easier. I think I trust my methodology. Uh, I trust the ways that I communicate. I trust myself to be fair and honest with myself, generally speaking. But if I were to say an older person that I talk to about minor and major issues, it's my mom, and I don't know if she would say that I really don't talk to her that often about personal issues. But if I had to, she'd probably be the few people that I would say are on my discussion list, people that I speak with on a regular basis to give me guidance on most things. Let's see. If I had to say, what was the last thing I got guidance on? I don't know if I don't even know if I would say that I get guidance from people. I learn from their examples mostly. So if someone says that I did this thing and it worked out for me, I probably would investigate more on that thing, whatever that thing was. I had a friend of mine who was kind of big into kind of, well, I won't say big into the stock market, but it made me he was enough into it that it made me interested in seeing what that was about. So I did some research and I got involved because I felt like that would be the way to understand it better. So I didn't necessarily ask his advice, so to speak, but I did take from his example. So I guess that's one of the ways you can say that I accept advice or guidance from people. So that's one of the ways that I did that. Let's see. Same question here. So if you had to are we at here? If you had to say in your personal life, who do you go for sound guidance on most topics? So I said for older people or people who are at least 10 years older than me, it would probably be my mom. But like I said, I mostly go for advice by just looking at their example. So if they've gone a path that I want to go, I would probably check out their path before I would say, "Tell me what to do." I'm more of a self solver in regard to what I would do in specific situations. So my mom would probably she'd get the nod for the older person that I would go to if I went to anyone for advice. Now, I will say the person I haven't gone to this person, but if you read anything that I've written anytime recently, if you let's see, if you any post or any quotes or anything, you probably know I quoted my uncle James Toon many times. My uncle and former pastor James Toon. So that would be one person I would definitely say I have looked at his life, his experiences, and his stories as both a minister and my uncle as a great advice, great sounding board, great excuse me, a great a mentor of sorts without being directly connected here. Now Valencia says that in regard to advice, who does she look to? She said she journals a lot, and that's a way that she works through her problems, and also reading her Bible to figure it all out. Okay. So she also says that Maria Lopez, which is a former coworker of hers, has given her lots of sound advice, and I think that's important if we can find resources to be a good sounding board, and reliable resources. Because I mean, if you ask anyone for advice, people definitely will give you advice, good or bad. So I think it's best to look for people who are good sounding board for information. So I think that's part of the reason why I did the podcast, looking for people who were great sounding boards. Again, not just to give me information, but to display with their lives what's a good path to follow and a good path to even consider, even if it's something that I may not do, something to consider with what I'm already doing. So, hey, Kristen, or I'm sorry, Kirsten. I say Kristen always do that. I know she's probably got that a million times being named Kirsten. So, hey, Kirsten. And Daryl, hey, what's going on? So, we got Daryl, Kirsten, and Valencia here. And our first question here, we'll go over again here. The first question was in your personal life, who do you go for sound guidance on most topics? So, like I said, I go to my go-to people if I had to say, and I don't necessarily go to people. Like I said, I just mostly um, observe their example. So for me, who are in that older age group, it would be my mom and also my uncle, because I think those are probably the two most impactful people in my life. So for older people, those are where I go to, and it's like I said, it's more of their example than what they've come to me and sat me down and said. More of the example. So I like to involve myself with people who have a good example, because it's one thing for a person to tell you do this or do that, but if they haven't done anything, hey Daryl, if they haven't done anything, it's a totally different ball game if you're listening to them. I told a friend of mine, well, I got a quote from a friend of mine who says, I never trust anyone's advice who hasn't been hit in the face really hard." So I said, well, that's a good point, because that's a person who has taken a chance and has learned that maybe that wasn't the best move to make, and they temper themselves accordingly. So I think that's a good way to approach it for examples. So if I had to pick a person on that same question, who would I go to for sound advice? I covered people who would be in an older age bracket, so that'd be 10 years and above your age bracket. And if I had to say in my age group, who would I go to? Let's see. I think the age group might be the same deal, because I'm not the type of person that would just go to a person and say, please tell me, give me advice on this thing or that thing, unless it was something really big that I had no clue about. Then I might consider that path. So if I had to go to a person in my age bracket, who let's see, for advice, it would be whose example do I look to? So well, I'll say a couple of most of my friends, the people that I surround my circle with, Daryl that was on the show recently, very, very good example of pushing forward and persevering and setting goals and looking for something greater here. Uh, see, Daryl chimed in here, says that he has a number of people who he considered to be on his board of directors. I like to use folks who have experience in whatever I'm trying to work out, and I can agree with that. I can definitely agree with that. Valencia says, how can a person get to the point how can a person get to the point where they can be a good sounding board for themselves? Okay, that's an interesting question here. The Daryl says, I look for people that will give me direction rather than answers. And I can agree with that. Like I said earlier, in regard to my mom and to my uncle and my former pastor, people who are very good beacons by their life. They can give you direction on things you want to go and things you want to do rather, and places you want to go and a direction to get you there. So I think it's a good thing to get direction more so than answers for me as well. So I can agree with Daryl on that point here. And to cut back to what Valencia said here, how can a person get to the point where they can be a good sounding board for themselves? I think the best way is to try things out and to see my opinion here, to try things out and to see how successful they are. Like for me, we'll use this as a prime example. This podcast here, Some Roses Are Red. So I wanted to know if I could, if I had a voice, well, not if I had a voice, if I had a voice and I had a message that people would respond to. So I think that starting the web, it's not the website, the podcast was a good chance for me to put that out there. So my thought was, so how do I start a podcast and will it be effective? So I threw that out there, and what it bounced off was other people who felt the same way and people who listened and said, well, yeah, I can agree with that, and here's my input. And I said, well, that's good input. Well, here's some more input. So it's more of trying to see what works, trial and error. And I'm a big fan of trial and error. So if you can set a goal and try some stuff to see what sticks and see what stuff doesn't work for whatever you're trying to do and whatever you're trying to accomplish, I think that's a good way to attack it. So to be a good sounding board for yourself, I'd say you got to try some things and see, what your instincts look like. If your instincts say do this thing and do that thing and they're successful, then I would continue to push toward that way. But if your instinct says, I'm gonna start a bubble gum and nuts company where I'm gonna put peanuts inside the bubble gum, you may not want to do that because that might not be a good look. Everybody doesn't want to chew bubble gum and nuts at the same time. So you might want to scale that back and just do bubble gum and say, well, my instinct for bubble gum was good, but adding the nuts on there was a little bit too much. So that's a good point for being a sounding board to yourself. If you have good advice, you can continue to push that, but you have to find out using trial and error, and again using the resources that are around you, like Daryl said, to find people who are more direction givers than necessarily answer, do this or do that. Because I don't necessarily think I don't think that helps you if you can't go through the path, if you can't see the intricate steps on how to get to where you want to get to. I think that's more important than just giving a person the answer. So, uh, excuse me. Back to who would I say in my age group that like I said, my peer group, my friends. Like I said, Daryl's definitely one of them. Jomar's definitely one of them. People and what I'll say, I didn't say this to them, but I'll say it here that I admire them and people like them who found their it. So you find your it and you push forward. Because for me, my it changes or has changed for number of years, and it's not unfulfilling to take a couple different paths and reset because my it changes. You never know. So for me, I'd say that I can admire people who find their goal and push forward toward that goal, because a lot of times it's a hard goal. It's not necessarily something that they thought that they could achieve, but again, it's not something that they thought they could not achieve. So I mean, it's a scary thing when you push for something that you may not have seen in your family, or you may not even have seen friends do it. So I think I applaud those gentlemen and people like them who set a goal and push toward that goal here. So, okay, Valencia says, but basically your answers for yourself should resonate with people or seem like they benefit not just yourself but humanity. Okay, let's see here. Your answers for yourself should resonate with people or seem like they benefit not just yourself but humanity. To be a good sounding board, I think that if you're talking about a sounding board for a specific goal, that would be what I was saying earlier about trying things out and seeing what's successful for you. That would be one way. But to be a good sounding board for others, you have to consider. I like to say consider things on a global scale, not just on a personal scale. So if it was someone asking you for advice about, we'll say, going back to school, I wouldn't necessarily speak from my experience on school. I would talk to that person to see what it is that they want, school to accomplish. What do they want to do? What field do they want to go into? And then we begin to talk about steps to get there. So to be a good sounding board globally, I think you have to do far more listening than you do speaking. And I think that person will be that evaluation period to say, well, this person said that, and I wasn't necessarily feeling that. I wasn't going along with that, so I couldn't vibe with that one. So I think that's a there we go. I think that's a good a good a good path to take if you can let that other person be that sounding board here. She says, yes, I'm talking about the sounding board comment. Okay. So yeah, if you're gonna be a good sounding board, you're gonna definitely listen more than you're gonna give advice for a person, depending on what they're looking to achieve in regard to a goal or a path. Because like I said with earlier with Daryl's comment, and what I would agree with, that I like to have people that are more direction liars, and not even people who would say go this way or go that way, but people who have said I did this and I like this part, and I would consider that, and I'd observe their path and say I could vibe with that, or that's not something I'm really feeling, so I wouldn't go that direction. So if I had to move to our second part of that, let's see, we said in our age group, and like I said, it would be, excuse me, in my older age group, it would be my mom and my uncle. Whew, excuse me. And in my peer group, it would definitely be the people that I'm around most often, my friends, people that I play music with, um, coworkers to some degree, some coworkers to some degree, depending on their disposition, because I don't necessarily want to take advice from someone who may be where I want to be from a financial standpoint or for a wellness standpoint if they are like mean spirited, we'll say. We'll call it that. If you're bitter and just angry all the time, I don't necessarily think I want to take your advice, because I don't want to end up bitter and angry, accomplished, but bitter and angry on the path to get there and after I've accomplished it. I don't think that's a place I want to be. So that might not be the vibe for me. So our next question here that we'll ease on down to here is let's see. What role, if it does play a role, do the external community play in empowering or discouraging you from finding and using your voice? Because remember, we're talking about communication, saying what you need to say. So, what role does the external community, the outside world, outside of the world inside of your head, your inner monologue and your inner thoughts, what role does the external community play in empowering or discouraging you from finding and using your voice? I would say, I don't know, I I don't know if I would say that the external world played a large role in me finding my voice. For me, I was being an introvert to some degree. I would say I always had a a constant internal dialogue. So I would always be being quiet all the time. For me, I would always be talking or always be thinking about some topic or some social interaction or some problem. So for me, I would always be in deep thought. So I don't know if the outside world had much of a impact, except for if I was thinking something negative, whatever would happen in the outside world would seem to reinforce that. Like, oh, see, I told you they didn't like it anyway. You shouldn't have done it. Oh, that was stupid. So I don't necessarily think that. the outside world played a huge part in my discovery of my voice. I think what did it most for me was being honest in those internal dialogue moments. I think being honest with yourself and really having an open uh, and objective conversation about yourself. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Why are they weaknesses? Why are you afraid to do certain things, or why are you uh, pushing yourself toward certain things that may not be you may not have been successful in the past? And I know I've told a story about a time in my life where I wasn't in a good place. It was an ugly place, real bitter, real angry. And I remember when some things changed, and I said to myself, all these things that I wanted to do before that I held myself back for any number of reasons, I was going to try them. So at that point, once things in my life opened up and there was a change in my life, I decided that I was going to try to do everything. I wrote a list of everything I ever wanted to do, and anything that I was capable of doing, I tried it out within the next couple of years. And on that list was I wanted to learn how to play the bass initially. And the only reason I didn't play the bass is because when I told this story, I went to the music store and the guy, I told him, yeah, I'm going to play bass. What's a good beginner bass and a good beginner bass amp or something just to get me started? And the guy showed me some stuff, really cool stuff. And the one that he showed me, this is the one you should start with. And it was like $300 or $400. And at that time, I did not have $300 or $400 in my pocket to experiment. And I guess that was the point. I didn't love the bass that much to to overextend myself financially for it. And then he showed me a bunch of other stuff, and I saw drumsticks down the way. And I had family members that played drums. My grandfather played, my father played, my brother played at that time as well. And so he showed me a pair of drumsticks, and I can get a pair of drumsticks and like a little small practice pad, almost like a mouse pad. And it was like $12 altogether, 12, $13 altogether. And I'm like, well, I can do that at least, I'm on my way to get a bass. And what happened when I got it home, I practiced, and I actually started to fall in love with it. And um, I I think during that time, my brother must have moved out of town or something, but he used to play the drums at the church. So he moved out of town, and I started playing the drums, and the rest is pretty much on from there. I got comfortable in my in my bad playing enough to say I believe that I could get better, and there was no point during me practicing or even getting better, or even to this very day, where I felt like I could not do certain things. There was no point at all that I felt that I would I would not be there, that I would not be at the place where I wanted to be here. Okay, Valencia says that she agrees with not taking advice from bitter people. Yeah, that's a bad place to be, to take advice from bitter people. Valencia says, in regard to that last question that we asked, the external world shaping or discouraging your voice, she said, I think in terms of positive impact, it's nice to see that more women have embraced their natural hair and have a lot more care tips than before. That has helped me out a lot. Also, seeing more women breastfeeding has been cool for me, and belonging to Facebook groups that encourage common interests here. And Daryl says, in regard to that same question, in regard to the external world shaping or discouraging your voice, he says for him it's very little. If I know where I'm going, you're either on board or in the way, and I can agree with that as well. I still try to love everyone where they are, and I can agree with that, but I don't give their opinions much weight. I do, however, try to pay attention on how I get my communication across effectively. Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. So you do need some awareness about who you are speaking to, definitely. So you kind of got to temper your, not temper, that's a bad word. You kind of have to be selective in who you're asking and what you're asking. So and that's even if you're not asking, you have to be selective in the things you tell the general world, because I think a lot of times people get discouraged when they mention a dream or a hope or a goal, and for whatever reason, even people who are well-meaning have a tendency to poo-poo on your dreams. So if you said I want to be an astronaut, the first thing somebody would say, well, you never were good at math, and I'm like, I didn't say that I would be an astronaut tomorrow. And like, who's to say that I can't get better at math? And who's to say that I can't get better at science? So I definitely, to Daryl's point, agree with that you do need to have some awareness on the people that you're speaking to or speaking around. And I think to Daryl's point that he said on the podcast with he and Andrea, that I think you have to have a killer instinct in regard to that internal voice and the voice that you're pushing out to the world. You have to have a killer instinct in regard to you have to say this is what I want, and I'm not going to settle for second place or third place. I want to be where I set my goal to be, and you kind of have to say I'm not going to take no for an answer because sometimes people will say no because they think that they're being helpful. Sometimes people will say no. I say more often, people will say no because they're afraid. They for whatever reason they project their fears onto you and what they would do if they were in your situation, not knowing your vision, not knowing your goals, not knowing your plan of attack. They just in a means to be helpful, we'll say, they have a tendency to come across extremely negative, not even realizing that they are, but they do just because that's where they're coming from. And for me, for the things that I really really wanted, the things that I really pushed for, I didn't. I don't think I've asked anybody's opinion or anybody. I didn't really need it because things that I wanted. Excuse me. Excuse me. Especially in regard to this podcast, even and music specifically. I didn't ask anybody's opinion. I didn't ask anybody, what do you think if I did this, or how would you jump on board if I did these things? These were things that I wanted to do. So the drive behind these things was me. It was all me. This is what I want. This is what I think could happen, and this is how I'm going to start. So for a lot of those things where I would start, sometimes things change, and like I said, I want to play bass, but when I got to the store, things changed, and I adapted, and I still had that same goal. I want to do music, so I had that same goal, and I pushed forward because it's what I wanted. There was never a point where I believed I couldn't be successful at this. There were days where I'm like, man, I'm not progressing as fast, or there were definitely days where I was discouraged just because I wasn't where I thought I should be at that point in time. But I think that you have to definitely be aggressive. And I think Daryl used the term, you have to be a pit bull about these things because that's important. If you're not going to be 100% invested in these things, then why even do it here? Daryl adds to that question here. If you know your worth, what people think or say matters so little, and I can agree with that. Once you've established your internal positioning, what people say on the outside, it kind of just bounces off here. You have to really want what it is that you want. I can agree with that 200%, 300% percentages again. You have to really know what you're looking for. So if you really want what you want, you have to give it a shot. You have to try. And I mean, nobody's saying that your first try will be the most successful, but you have to set your feet out there. I had a quote once that I said that no person can progress if you have 1 foot above and 1 foot behind. You can't even go upstairs that way. You either have to put both feet on the stairs going down or both feet on the stairs going up. Otherwise, you'll just be stuck in that same position. So you have to take both feet and you have to step in the direction that you want to go. You can do it afraid, and it's okay. I once learned that the definition of bravery is not the absence of fear, but rather the willingness to act despite it. And I think that that's a good thing here. Yeah, percentages again, man. I can't help it. You have to be willing to step out on what you believe. And I mean, you may not have. It's a good thing to make some plans and to make some steps and to get yourself to a position where you can have a course of action. But if you just have that first step, it's important that you commit yourself wholeheartedly and 100% to that first step, because I think if you don't commit yourself to that first step, it's difficult to get that second step. If you're, like I said, if you're on a set of stairs and you're going to put 1 foot above you and 1 foot behind you, you got to move that other foot one direction. You got to make a decision to either keep going forward or you're going to fall backwards, or you'll just be standing in that one spot. So I mean, I think that the people who I want to say it was what was her? I want to say it was Meredith Vieira, the used to be on the View, and she used to be on, I want to say, was it either Good Morning America, one of the morning talk shows, the national talk shows, and she was saying that in regard to her broadcasting career and even journalism, that she took a job at a station, not even, not even sure that she wanted to be a journalist, not even sure she wanted to be an on camera personality. But she said that she was too dumb to be afraid, was her words. And she said if she would have thought about it like with her mind that she had now, being an older person, she probably would have been too afraid to try those things. But because she was so young, and if she was fired, and she was so young and she was fired up for that thing, journalism and broadcasting, that she took a step out and she found success. So I think that same thing applies for each one of us here in regard to how much of a role do the external community play in your internal voice. To Daryl's point, and I would echo that you have to make the outside noise as minimal as possible. You have to get to a point where you're strong enough to state your point or to take your steps and to withstand whatever may come. I think that it's a good point to be, if you have a plan, it's a good point to step out on those plans, and whatever people can say or even do, you can still say, well, okay, I accomplished step one. Let me keep pushing for step two and see what we can get for step two here. Valencia says that I agree with you both. You have to push for what you want, because if you don't, you might have regrets. The first step is important because you at least have to try. So I think that you do have to, like they say, the first step to walking a thousand, well, the first key to walking 1,000 miles is taking that first step. And there was a quote that says, "How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time." So it's just like that. You have to be unafraid enough to step out and say, these are things that are important to me, and I want to see them through to completion. And that's the other part. You have to be disciplined enough that when you take that first step, you have to move out. Yeah, that's me, Eli. Had another listener. Eli grabbed the second set of headphones. You have to take that first step. I know. I know. You have to take that first step, and when you take that first step, you have to commit. Right. Because I'm watching so much fun. You are. And once you take that first step, you have to commit yourself to the journey, because I think you're doing yourself a great disservice if you can only take the one step and then you don't follow through. Because I think that's when the external voices seem to get a little bit louder, when they say, "Oh, I told you that you should have done this, and you should have taken these steps," and then if you didn't follow through, now you're in your head, and your internal monologue begins to say, "Well, maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't prepared enough. Maybe I should just wait until a later time." And what that reminds me of in regard to taking steps and following through, even when it doesn't seem like the best time, I'm reminded of, huh? This headphone's loud. Not now. Yeah. No. I'm reminded of a message that Barack Obama was saying, that in regard to running for office, he was saying that if he didn't do it now, when was a better time? Because I would admit that if I were a friend of his and he was saying, "I'm thinking about running for president, I'm gonna," I might have said, "Well, you got a good job as a senator. I don't know if that's a good look." But that's not any bearing on what his vision was, or what his qualifications were, or what his dream were. That's just my own fear projecting onto another person. I don't think it's an unfair burden to put on somebody. And I think people that love you do that out of concern, but not realizing that they're putting that weight on you. And I think it's an unfortunate thing that people do. Very well-meaning people who are definitely in your corner, but I think we do that as a means to possibly try to protect one another, or possibly as a means to, I don't know, to live vicariously, I guess. So to live vicariously, you don't want to take a risk if it were you. And I don't, it is what it is on that one because I know that I've done it, and if I've done it to anyone who's listening here, any of the people listening, I truly do apologize. Hey, Eli.
Hey.
Hey, I do apologize because it's.
I apologize.
I know, buddy. It's it doesn't help. It doesn't help you with reaching your goal here. So Daryl says, always remember that you must remain flexible in your approach because the game plan never goes according to your plan. Exactly. Definitely, definitely. So step two may not even seem close to what you have envisioned,
Step
but
two
it
is
doesn't make your goal
always
out of
hard.
reach. Definitely. Step two may be totally off of the path. Once you take step one, you find out how how to zero in on what your step two should be. So I think that's a good point, a good point to focus on. That Daryl said, your step two may not go according to the plan, and I think that that's another point where people kind of use that as a means to say, well, I should have never tried. You let the external
According
voice
to
start to become your
crocodile
internal
justice.
voice, and I don't think that that's
According to
a good
crocodile
point.
justice, don't
Huh?
bite your finger.
I don't know what you're saying, boy.
Crocodile justice, don't bite your finger.
Okay, got crocodile Dennis, got you. So you have to make sure that if your step two doesn't look like, excuse me, doesn't look like your plan, that you still keep pushing forward and that you evaluate, not that you change your plan, but that you take into take into consideration uh, what the new step two could be, how what you envisioned didn't necessarily end up being what you wanted, but how you still press forward and how you can make that new step to uh, a viable means to accomplish the greater goal. And I think that's what you should be pushing for. You still have to have, even in your step one, your step two, three, four, and five, you still have to have a vision for your greater goal. I know we kind of got on goals here, but that's it's the same thing in regard to communication, saying what you mean to say. This is we're talking about communication within oneself. So in regard to setting those goals, you have to be very assertive with yourself. You have to be very communicative, effectively communicative within yourself to even combat the external monologue. Because I think you have to, before you say it to the outside world, you have to have these things within yourself to, you know what I mean, to secure your goal within yourself. And I liken it to there's a scripture where King David was talking, and he said a prayer that in regard to God, he said, "Thy word have I hidden in my heart, so that I may not sin against thee." And I think that's a good thing to have your vision and your goal within your heart, so that you don't stray from that purpose and that plan. Just like David said in regard to the word of God. So I think that it's a good thing. If you're speaking about goals, to definitely have that before you decide to speak it publicly. As Daryl said, you have to be aware of your surroundings. So before you decide to speak that goal or that purpose publicly, you have to get to a point where you well, you're secure enough to do so. Because if you're not secure enough to do so, the very first time somebody says, "I don't think you can do it," you'll start saying, "Well, maybe I can do it," and that's not where you want to be. That's a hard uphill climb to get past. And I think that, I often say that I can help a person defeat an enemy, but if you're already in a fight and you want to bring me into another fight, I can't help you win two fights. That's too tough. So you have to first win the victory over yourself, so that you can actually say the goal out loud. You can actually, excuse me, you can actually put into practice what you want those goals to be. And like Daryl said, if you're step two or if you're step three or whatever step along the way doesn't end up being what you had written down or what you had planned, you can adjust. And nobody says that you have to be rigid with your steps. What you're looking for is the best means to accomplish the greater goal. You have to be focused on the greater goal. So if your step one changes a little bit, step two changes a little bit in a different direction, you have to be focused enough on those goals to make sure that you say, well, okay, I'm going to reset, but I'm still going to focus myself on the greater goal here. So that was our question. Had two little subplots here. The external community playing empowering or discouraging you from defining your voice, generally speaking and personally. And I think we covered those pretty well here. Generally and personally speaking on that external voice and that internal voice. And and I think that in regard to the external and the internal voice, what's really cool about that is the more you start to encourage that internal voice, the more you start to push toward the things that you want to do or toward the lifestyle that you like to lead. I think that it gets even more reaffirming to yourself, which is weird because you have to affirm yourself to say it. But then the more you say it, the more it starts to solidify. You start to get a better foundation. I found within whatever it is you want to do, and I found that the more you believe in a thing, the more people around you begin to believe in a thing. So if you say that you want to, I want to climb a mountain, and people are like, well, you're not that strong, and whatever. And you say, but I still want to climb the mountain. They say, well, you don't have the right kind of gear. You never took a climbing class, and your next step, you sign up for a climbing class. I want to climb a mountain. The more you say it, and the more, and again, to Daryl's point, I know we spoke about during the podcast, the more you affirm it, and then the key point, if I had a bell, I'd ring that now, ding, ding, ding. The more action you take toward that goal, making actionable steps. And I think we talked about that in the podcast with Daryl and Andrea, making actionable steps that you can actually say, these are the things that I'm going to do, not just say, these are the things that I'm going to do, and you actually start to do those things. In regard to the mountain climbing analogy, if you take those steps toward climbing that mountain, if you take those steps toward taking the classes, if you take those steps toward buying the gear to climb the mountain, I think that you find yourself not only, negating the external voices. They may be naysayers, positive or slightly negative, constructively negative. I think that you find yourself around more like-minded people. For whatever reason, you kind of gravitate toward people who are like-minded, who are driven toward whatever their goal may be. It may not be the same as yours, but you find yourself around those like-minded people, and I think that those people do an awesome job of encouraging you to keep pushing forward. So it kind of reaffirms itself. So it's a dope thing. It's a very, very dope thing here. Daryl says self-esteem, pride, and success is bred through keeping your word to yourself, not just what's spoken out loud, but those thoughts that you have privately. Oh, definitely, definitely, definitely. Anybody can talk a good game and say, well, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But if you don't live those things, and if you don't have those things within the core of who you are, it's just talk. It's lip service. It's gassing. You're a jacker. You're not based on nothing. You have no substance. You have no foundation. And I don't necessarily like to, well, I don't at all. I won't say necessarily. I don't like to be around people who have no foundation. If you don't believe in anything, I don't. You got to believe in something, even if it's something I don't believe in. If you believe in it, at least we can have some type of jumping off point. We can have some type of a discussion point from there. So I think to Daryl's point there, you have to keep your word to yourself, and you have again to the inner monologue. You have to be solid in your inner monologue before you go out there, because the world is filled with critique, like I said, out of fear, critique out of love, critique out of just simply critique because it's Wednesday or it's Monday, critique because why not. And I think that if you set your internal monologue to something that is strong enough to support you saying it, number one, but strong enough to support you saying it even when there's no physical evidence of what it is that you want to do. I think there's another scripture that says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, but the evidence of things not seen. So just you believing it is more real to you, the believer. Once you have this locked within yourself, it's more real than the person who built something but doesn't believe in it. It's more real until you take the steps to make it materialize. And I think that's a very, 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 very good thing to do, because before you can make something materialize, you have to believe and you have to have a vision within yourself of whatever that thing may be. So in regard to our talk on communication, you have to have an idea of what you want to say, how you want to say it, what you want to, what do you want to have accomplished from that. So since we're still on the internal and external monologue, you have to have you have to have in saying to the people that you're saying, you have to have some steel within yourself to say, this is what I want. I know that there are going to be people who don't understand or who don't necessarily share my dream or who think I should do it a different way, but this is what I want. And I may end up changing it at a later point, but for right now, this is what I want to push for. Ooh, excuse me. So let's see if there's another part to that question. What role does the external community play in empowering and discouraging you to find your voice? We did that one. And I think it's safe to say that we hope that you would get to a point where that external voice or the external voices are not necessarily even relevant to what you want to do. They're relevant in regard to now you know who you want to get closer to. Now you know what information you want to share with these people. Now you know who can help you along your journey and who can just sit on the sidelines and pass you cups of water. So in regard to that, we found out uh, how the external community can empower or discourage you. I think they can discourage you if you don't have your internal voice strong enough. And I think they can empower you if they're like-minded people who are on that same wavelength. So that would be my resolve on that one here. Hey Maria, how are you? How are you? How are you? Thank you very much. God bless you for the positive impact. God bless you too. Hey Eli. Hi Eli. So I think that in regard to what we got here, in regard to internal and external voices, and for me, I could talk for a ton of time about internal voices because for a very, very long time, my internal dialogue was reaffirmingly negative, and I couldn't tell you for the life of me why it was. I couldn't point to one specific thing and say, well, it's because of this. It could have been any number of things, and it was, you know what I mean. And I think it's the same for other people. When you don't have a concrete plan or you don't have anyone to help you with those internal voices, and I don't think to help you establish a firm internal voice. I don't think that many people do, especially I say as kids and youth. It just doesn't just doesn't come up. But I think what helps with that is I think sports help with that. I think for me a great deal of that was the church and church groups and stuff. They help with establishing a sound internal voice. If you play sports, a lot of sports teams will help you develop a sound internal voice. I think that music as well. Music will help you develop a sound internal voice because you have to take those steps. Even as a kid, you have to take those steps out on the things you like, and you find out what is successful and what isn't successful. And during the times when your voice isn't as strong, you have to cultivate it. You have to grow it. You have to try something, and you have to be successful. And you have to fail. Hi, Eli. We see you. Go get dressed, buddy.
I'll be dressed.
Go get dressed. So that's, and I know we could talk for forever and ever on internal dialogue, and we may come back to that one. So we have one more question here, and this one says that when a miscommunication occurs, how much responsibility do you take in making sure clarity is achieved between both parties? And that's a good one for me because I think that in regard to miscommunications can happen for any number of reasons. I think that miscommunications can happen for the most honest of reasons. I think that we assume, unfortunately, far too much without giving people a chance to say, well, no, I didn't understand it to be that or understand it to be this. I think miscommunications can occur when we assume that, oh, this person knows me and they should know this about me. So when I say this, they should know that I mean this. And when I say that, they should know that I mean that. So, Valencia says, one of my goals for my family is to have a place where my children and husband feel free to talk about different topics because that is something I wish I had growing up. And I think I had to relearn communication as an adult just because I couldn't have open conversations in my household growing up. And I think that's a dope goal to have. And I think, there's an interesting quote that says, to gain patience, you have to wait. And I think to have a communicative house, you have to communicate. So so I think it's good to in regard to, let's go back to that question here, in regard to when miscommunications occur, it's good to set a good I guess a good defense. And a good defense against miscommunication is to spend a lot more time having open communications, because the best way to avoid miscommunications is to establish good lines of communication. And if you have good lines of communication, it's not so tricky to navigate finding out what it is a person meant when they said X, Y, and Z. If there was a miscommunication, you'd be more apt to say, "Hey, I thought you meant this when you said, whatever you said," and the person will say, "Well, no, I meant this because I wanted this to happen," and da 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 da. And I think it's an easier path for people to go down if you can have an established communication where you can say these things we're gonna work on, so that if there are miscommunications, because they happen, this is life. uh, when the miscommunications do happen, we can come to a point where we can say, uh, I value this person enough, and I think to that point, communication is very very, it's an intimate thing. Communication, having good communication, because you have to have trust. You must have trust to have effective communication, and that's not just on a romantic level. That's on any levels of communication, any levels of relationship. You have to have uh, a trust in that person. You have to have a trust that when they're speaking to you, they're speaking to you as a peer, not as a person who feels like they're superior to you, or as a person who feels like, oh, you can't offer me anything, so I'm just going to talk at you. And I think that in regard to communication, once you have established that trust with the person, you can trust that if you don't agree, or even if you may have misheard them, you can you can ask and feel free to engage in a conversation with a person and not feel like, oh, this is going to turn into a fight. If I don't understand, so I ask again, they're going to get upset, or they're going to start yelling, or it's going to be a problem. So I think that first establish to first establish the tools to help you not have miscommunications, you have to establish some trust. And you have to with whoever. Like I said, it doesn't have to be romantic, or it doesn't have to be relational at all. It can be with a coworker. You have to establish some level of trust that this person doesn't isn't this person is not out to get me. This person is not out to harm me. This person is not out to make me look like a fool. This person is not out to get over on me. You have to establish, some type of boundaries. Uh, Not boundaries is bad, but some type of parameter, even though it's the same thing. Some type of parameters in regard to how we're dealing with communication to avoid miscommunications. And to the questions point, it says in miscommunication. So let's say that you've done all those things, and you've established trust in your communication. You practice open lines of communication. You practice talking about small things, and you built up to bigger things here. So when a miscommunication occurs, because like I said, we are human, miscommunications do happen. Uh, how much responsibility do you take making sure that clarity is achieved between both parties? I can only speak for myself on this one. In regard to when miscommunications occur, um, I know for me, I look at it more on in a relational aspect. So when miscommunications occur, I take it as my responsibility, up to 50%, because if there's two parties, you're 50-50. Up to 50% in that I think that it is my job in communication to convey my point, or to convey my message as clearly as possible. And if the other person didn't get a clear message, by their response, or by their action, or by them just saying I didn't get it, I think that it's important to talk to the person, to try it from a different angle, just like a teacher would. If you student's not getting a lesson one specific way, you want to try it a couple different ways, because everybody's not gonna receive information the same way. Every student's not gonna learn the same way. So you have to approach it from a myriad of different ways. But even in that, you have to have trust that the person is not stonewalling you and just not wanting to understand. They just may not get the way that you're trying to communicate. So for me, I try a bunch of different methods. If I try it one way, it's not effective. Okay. I try to regroup. I talk to that person and try to find out how much of that intended message were they able to receive. So depending on how much of that initial message they received, I would tailor my communication or tailor my approach to communication to make sure there wouldn't be a miscommunication. So I would take as much responsibility as possible, knowing that within myself, if it got to a point where I was getting frustrated, I would be responsible enough to take some time to not, not blow up on that person because they're just trying to get an understanding, just like any other person would try to get an understanding. So, in regard to miscommunications, like we said, you must have trust to have effective communication. You must practice that communication. You have to try those as many times as possible. You have to, try communication rather as many times as possible. So you have to talk, even if it's not, about anything, super serious. You have to talk. You have to talk. You have to talk. You have to make the other person comfortable with going, with having a dialogue with you because it's difficult to talk to strangers. I think right up there with what was it? It was even greater than being in front of a wild animal. I think public speaking was still number one on the greatest fears of people, and it's because there's so many strangers, and you maybe you internalize what they would think or what they would say. So if you can establish comfortable lines of communication with, I would start with the people that you're close with to establish comfortable lines of communication so that if miscommunications, as we're talking to the question here, if miscommunications were to occur, you can find yourself at a point where you can say, oh well, this person didn't get what I was trying to say, or I didn't get what that person was trying to say, but I know I have a great deal of respect for this person. I know they have a great deal of respect for me. I trust this person, so let me try to communicate a little bit more to find out where it was that we got off track. And once we get to a point where we can get back on track, we can find out, where possibly the miscommunication happened here. And Valencia says, what are some of the things that need to be in place for you to trust that you can effectively communicate with someone? In my opinion, what are the things that need to be in place? Excuse me. What I would need to be in place for me personally to have an effective communication with a person, you have to have, above all else, you have to have, and for me, it's probably just one thing. You have to have trust. If you trust that this person is not out to get you, for me, if you trust that this person is not out to get you, if you trust that this person means the best for you, if you trust that this person, that's in relationships. But let's say if it were a job, if you trust that this person has the same goal in mind that you have, that you both want to, make the project or whatever job, you want to make it the most successful, you want to make it the most successful uh, that it can be. So if you have a common goal, you want to have that common denominator in regards to relationships. You want to have it be, we still care for one another. I still want the best for you. You still want the best for me. So in order to communicate effectively, we have to come from that standpoint. That way, if we miss the mark, we're not falling into bitterness territory, or we're not falling into fault finding territory, or we're not falling into, well, you should have done this, the nitpicking territory. So I think that if you have that trust in place in a relationship, it works good because you can fall back on that communication for in a relationship. In a workplace, if you have that common bond, that trust that we want to accomplish this goal, this person wants to meet the same goal that I do, this person wants to have a good outcome, and we want to have a successful project, a successful department, a successful satellite office or region, what have you. If you can have that trust in place, communication gets stronger, and where there is strong communication, there is likely less miscommunication. That's just my theory on that. So on that one, was that two part in there? Oh, just one part here. So in regard to how much responsibility do you take, or do I think the person should take, in making sure clarity is achieved between both parties? I think that you should take as much responsibility in your part of the conversation as humanly possible, because you want to make sure that you're heard correctly, and you want to make sure that the other person is heard also, because having a one-sided conversation doesn't last very long. If you're talking and talking and talking and the other person just doesn't seem like they're receiving you, it's not a good look. Not a good look at all here. So I guess we have reached our 1 hour mark here, from 7 to 8 o'clock here. So I don't want to hold up too much of your time. I thank each and every one of you. I know Kirsten checked in, Maria Lopez checked in, Valencia checked in, Daryl checked in. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for checking into the very first Some Roses Are Red live show event. Like I said, I hope to do at least two of these a month, depending, and we may have other people stop in for these live shows. In addition to the pre-recorded shows, they will still get every second and fourth Monday of the month here. So I thank you all for tuning in, because again, this was just something that I thought would be something that would be pretty cool. So you guys checking in made it definitely very, very, very cool for me. So I thank you very much for tuning in to Some Roses Are Red. Thank you for everybody who asked questions and who posted things on the Facebook live board here. I don't think yeah, the YouTube one. I don't know if that was working here, but anyway, the Facebook live. I thank you very much for checking in and for humoring me. And like I said, I plan to do at least two of these a month. Maybe it'll be just me. Maybe it'll be an in studio guest for the live shows as well. We never know. We'll see how things go. As part of what Daryl said, if your plan as you imagined it has to change, roll with the punches and still push towards the greater goal here. So thank you very much again. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Monday. Hope you had a fantastic day for your Monday. And if I don't see you sooner than that, hopefully we'll see each other again on the next Facebook Live on, let's see when that's going to be. That's going to be on the 18th of February. So thank you again, guys, and have a great night.
Look, here you come, here you come.